realize how much comedy was built into your brand until I did my research for this, and then also the fact that I saw your T-shirt game was even stronger than your Instagram game.
Thanks, dude. I think my Instagram is just so stupid. I don't know why. I just can't like I can't it just feels wrong to use it in a serious manner for some reason. So,
Yeah,
yeah.
absolutely. Where did the whole idea of Zookeeper come from? Because I think even just your name by itself kind of fits your branding of what you post.
Yeah, so basically I just started doing like remixes for fun like years ago, and this was like sort of like during like the hype machine era,
Mm,
and I just basically like I had this list on my computer of like, for whatever reason, like anytime like one of my friends would think of like a funny DJ name or a band name or something, we would like write it down. And I remember like I did this one remix for the Ready Set, who's like a pop punk act. And I remember saying to my manager at the time, I was like, "Yo, wouldn't it be funny if like one of these remixes that did well on Hype Machine, and like I should just release a different remix under a different one of these dumb names?" Like I had like no intention of like making this like my job,
right.
and I was like, "Oh, like maybe I should like just release each one under like a stupid name, and then if one of them catches on, I'll just see like how far I can ride it." And this was like when like all the Dutch and Swedish DJs were like really becoming big in America.
Mm.
And I remember thinking like, this is like I'm such an idiot. Like it's so stupid, but like I remember thinking it would be funny for there to be like an American DJ, but his name looks like someone foreign
Right.
misspelling an American word.
Which is why you
So that's
have
why
the
like the grammar like
what is that little
doesn't.
thing called that you have over
Yeah,
the
the
second O?
umlaut and
Yep.
like yeah, it doesn't. It's so grammatically incorrect. Like
Yeah.
it's so stupid. And like now, of course, like nobody can. Like I just, it was a complete self-own because nobody could like spell. Like we have to tell people so often, like just copy and paste it from the email
Yeah.
we put on the flyer or whatever, because nobody knows how to type it. It's so dumb, but uh, but it is sort of perfect, I guess, in
Yeah,
a
it's
way.
awesome. Um, I kind of the branding behind it. Can you just give me like a breakdown? Like if you were talking to someone for the first time, and they just found out about your music, what would you tell them your brand was about?
Like the brand, aside from like what my music sounds like.
Yes.
Uh,
Like what is your project like the theme of your project kind of?
I just like I grew up like listening to like Blink 182,
Okay.
and like my favorite thing ever is like the Mark Tom and Travis show, like their live
Oh
album.
yeah. Yep.
And half of it is like basically like stand up. Like they're
Yeah.
just not even playing music half the time. They're just like making stupid like dick jokes and stuff like that. And like I had been in a band, like a touring band before, and it was fun, but like we took it so seriously.
Yeah.
And I was just like, I think like if I do this a second time around, it has to just be like what my personality is like. And I have my humor is like I'm like a 12-year-old. Like I'm like a kid
Yep.
in like sixth grade. Like that's like what like I and it's getting worse actually as I get older. I'm becoming less mature like with my humor. So I think that's what I mean. I have like sperm in my logo. It's just
Yep.
so stupid.
Yep.
But yeah, so I don't know. I guess that
That's
would be the
funny. Yeah,
answer.
I see a lot of going back to the whole Instagram thing. I see a lot of your brown dildo that you use a lot.
The brown dildo made a couple of that almost got me kicked off of TikTok, which is why
What
I didn't use
really?
TikTok for a long. Yeah, it was my first TikTok that I put up, and it got banned, and then I couldn't post for a
What
while.
the
It was really
heck?
stupid. Yeah.
I don't know if you've incorporated it into your brand. I was going to ask you. I see that you talk a lot about it, and is your passion for golf. How long have you been playing golf?
Um. So, well, I played. I like my grandpa and my dad played a lot of
Okay,
golf when I was a kid, so I'd like go and just tag along, and then I didn't play for like a decade. Um. But when COVID started
nothing else
and
to
we were
do.
all locked down, like
Yeah,
me and my roommate were like, dude, should we just like he played golf when he was a kid too, and we were like, should we just like get golf clubs? And it ended up becoming like the highlight of my week during lockdown because it was like one of the only things you could really
yep,
go do. So, and you know, golf's like when you're a kid, it's fun. When you're an adult, you're like, oh, I get it. Like it takes like 6 hours. You're having drinks. You're driving the cart around like a complete lunatic,
right.
dressing dumb as hell. I went on eBay and I bought like all these super corporate like corporate branded polos and stuff. My favorite thing in golf is how like gross like the sponsorships are.
Yep.
Like everyone's like playing golf in like Goldman Sachs hats and stuff. So I was like, I bought like Boeing and Raytheon polos and stuff, and I
That's
don't know. We
funny.
just dressed like complete assholes.
That's super funny. Yeah, definitely. I feel like you just one of those things that you got interested in. You just kind of like incorporated your branding into like all the jokes and stuff that you make. You're like, why
100%.
can't I do this in golf?
I know. I wish like I wish there was more of a crossover of like golf and like house music.
Music, yeah.
The people don't like the same things.
No.
So like anytime I post anything about golf on my Instagram, like nobody gives a fuck about it,
That's
which
hilarious.
then makes me want to do it more because
Yep,
it's like
yep.
stupid and funny. But yeah, it's a really good way to kill your engagement. To all you DJs out there, post a bunch of golf
Post
stuff.
golf stuff, which is kind of funny because you think about like other industries, and like golf is one of those like kind of a business thing for other industries, but for music, like no one's into it.
Yeah, not really. I mean, there are definitely like some producers who play golf,
Yeah.
but golf and raves are sort of at odds with each other, I feel like.
Yeah.
Yeah.
um, when you first started the Zookeeper project, excuse me, in 2013, you started with doing like remixes and stuff, and then you didn't really release your original music until 2015, right?
2015 or maybe even 2016. Oh yeah,
Okay.
yeah. I guess it would be like late 2015. Yeah, yeah. I was doing a lot of remixes. I was like doing some like sort of ghost production stuff, helping other people. But I was like really nervous about putting out
Hmm.
my first stuff.
Why was that?
Um, I just thought it like sucked,
Yeah.
and I wasn't DJing before that. Like I came to production before DJing,
Okay.
so I wasn't able to test out my stuff. And I actually think like it was going to Miami Music Week one year, and like a handful of tracks that I'd produced I like heard them out at clubs or like a
Hmm.
couple people played them at Ultra, and then that's when I was like, oh okay, yeah, this stuff's like good enough, and that was sort of like the push I needed to start releasing stuff.
That's cool. I wanted to go kind of before you started releasing your own music, and you already said that you used to be a guitarist for a touring band, right?
Yeah,
Who was that for? Who did you play for?
it was Cash Cash. They're like
Oh,
DJs now.
sick. Yeah.
Yeah, but it was like sort of like a pop punk
I didn't know they.
electronic
I didn't
band.
even. I don't know their background. I didn't know that they did that before. That they became
Yeah,
Cash
yeah,
Ass.
we're
What
like
we
all
know as
from the
Cash Ass
same.
today.
We're all from the same area in New Jersey,
Okay.
and like our old bands used to play together. And so when they like lost their guitar player, I like joined up with them for a little while
Hmm.
and did some touring and stuff.
What motivated you to leave them and go start your own thing? Like, what was that time like?
I just wasn't like I think it kind of felt like our time was coming to an end on like the music. Not into. I mean, they're like great producers, and obviously their time didn't come to an end. But
Hmm.
the iteration of like that project sort of felt like it was all kind of riding on like one single doing really well because we were signed to a major label, and I think when that didn't do what uh, the label had hoped it was going to do, it just made it kind of killed the morale,
Mm.
and that turned into like a lot of fighting and that kind of stuff. Um, but those guys are great, you know.
Yeah.
Uh,
Great producers now.
and obviously, yeah, they went on to like really, really like get to that sort of A level
Yeah.
in terms of like American DJs. So
Yeah.
props to them.
What was that transition like? Like, did you make anything on Ableton prior to, or
No, I
Ableton
didn't
or
really
any DAW,
produce
I
like
should say?
I learned like a little bit of production from them actually, but no, like I had always like played drums in
Mm.
bands when I was growing up, and I didn't really write. So wrote a very little bit for some of those bands, but it was after I left Cash Cash is when I started like really learning how to like produce
How
electronic
long do you
music.
think it took you, if you remember correctly? How long did it
A
take you
lot,
from?
honestly, a long time.
Yeah, yeah, I
It's like
figured. Yeah.
it's really hard. I think it's really, really hard. I always say like I think like getting to DJ is like the reward. Not that DJing is like super easy, but DJing doesn't make me like feel like I'm gonna lose my mind. Like sometimes like
Yeah.
producing makes me feel like I'm truly losing my mind.
Yeah, I just feel like that would be a huge transition, especially going from like a touring artist with a band to like having to take a major step back and like work on your own individual project. Yeah, that would take forever.
Yeah, it's not really even what I was trying to do. I was trying to just be like a pop producer
Oh,
after
okay.
that.
What
Um,
what inspired you to create house music? Like you went from like guitarist to
so
house
ba-
music.
yeah, basically like basically I wanted to be a pop producer, and I was like writing and producing pop songs, and that was all sort of when EDM was just starting to sort of boom in America. And my manager at the time worked at Warner Brothers Records as like a
Okay.
pop A&R, and a lot of the like pitch tracks that they were getting were from DJs. So I would hear, I'd be like hang out in his office. He'd be like, "Oh, listen to this," like people submitting tracks for like Jason Derulo or something like that, and there'd be like records from Diplo and
Damn.
Afrojack and people like that. And I remember just being like, "Damn, like if these don't get used by the label, these guys can just release them themselves. And it's
Yep.
not like a waste." Whereas like if you're producing, you're pitching songs and nobody uses them, like that's it. And and then like my best friend is actually like really good friends with Diplo from like years and years ago. So he would take me with him to like like some of Diplo's like Vegas shows right when he started doing like Mad Decent Mondays. I don't know if you remember when he
Okay.
was
Yeah.
doing that, but
Yep.
and that was like I hadn't toured in a while, and it just looked like fun what he was doing. I was like, oh, this is like just fun. You don't need to like rely on like other people. It's tough like in bands. It's like you have all these separate relationships with everybody, and it's really hard to like
Mm.
keep everybody on the same page. And like as a DJ, it was just like I don't know, it just seemed fun. I was like, oh, this guy just flies around, shows up 5 minutes before the set, and like,
You don't have to tour with a guitar. You just use a USB.
dude, honestly, dude, it's like the biggest thing.
Yeah.
I was like, I never want to like set up a drum set ever again.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And I feel like it's a completely like different like yeah, we do sound check and stuff for like EDM, but like it's a completely different thing for
Some people do, I
some
guess.
people do. Yeah, some people do. But yeah, with like drums and like a full actual band, I feel like that's like kind of a challenging part, especially if you're touring so much. Like you get to the venue, like that's a large chunk of your time that like the setup portion of it and sound
It's a
checking
young
and all that.
man's game. Like I think back to
Yeah,
doing that now, I'm like, I can't believe we did that.
yeah.
You have to get to the venue at like noon to play at like 9:30.
Yeah.
Yeah, it was just a lot. Does now thinking back to that, I'm like, how is that like sustainable? I guess it wasn't. I mean, if you really think about it, it's like it's really, really tough to be a band. I
Yeah.
have friends who are in
Especially
bands
early
too.
on. I feel like once like bands get to a certain level and they have employees to do that for them, like not so much, but early on when you're doing it all yourself, like yeah, that'd be a rough, very rough.
Yeah, yeah. And I mean, it's so fun because you're just like, you feel like you're a pirate just going from like, there's like the traveling bachelor party, just like 8 dudes rolling into like every city every night. But um, it's definitely a lot. Also,
Yeah.
like that type of touring, you sort of leave and you're gone for 2 months.
Yeah. Yeah. Where with being a the EDM artist, you can come home during the week and fly
Yeah,
out
it's
and
more of a
yeah.
weekend thing.
Yeah, yeah. With you being a guitarist, I know one of your first like big songs was your New Light remix by John Mayer. Was
Mhm.
that Can you tell me a little bit of that story? Like I know John Mayer is a magician when it comes to guitar. Was there any influence there? Is that why you did it or?
I mean, dude, basically, I knew from somebody on his management team, like I knew that they were looking for remixes for the song.
Okay.
Actually, what happened was, I'm friends with one of his managers or someone on his management team, and he was like, "Oh, we're gonna get remixes for John's new single,"
Mhm.
which they've never done before. I guess there have been no like official John Mayer remixes ever. He's like, "Who should I get?" And I was like, "You know what? Everyone would put themselves on the list."
Yeah.
But I was like, there's no chance I'm gonna get this anyway. Like, I've done a lot of remixes, and even when you do like remixes for like A-list artists, even if you like knock it out of the park, so often they just end up not coming out. Like, you'll get paid for them, and then they just don't come out. So I gave him a list of a bunch of producers that I just thought were dope. Most people I didn't even know, and then he asked me if like I wanted to do one also, and I was just like, yeah, like screw it, whatever. I basically I did it to like try to just get the session and poke
Mhm.
around in it.
Mhm.
Like that's all I really cared about doing. I was like, I just want to like get the multi-track for this and hang out in my room on my computer and like listen to all these individual parts from like his session.
Were you
That
a
was like what would be cool to me.
were you
And
were you a big John Mayer fan at the time? Like, did you like him as being
yeah,
a
I
guitarist
was
and stuff?
I became a big fan of his from the Continuum album.
Okay. Yep. Yep. Gravity
Um
and all that. Yep.
yeah, and then ever since then, yeah, big fan. And it was just so cool to go through and it was so cool to just go through and do that.
That's awesome.
And so I put together like a really basic arrangement of it. And I remember we sent it in, and I asked my manager, I was like, yeah, we didn't hear anything back on that, right? Like after like a couple months, I was like, that's not gonna happen, right? And he was like, oh no, I think it's actually like kind of like maybe gonna come out. And then from there, like yeah, I got like one more day to sort of just clean it up, and it did end up coming out. It
That's
was just like
awesome.
shocking. Like I never thought in a million years it was gonna come out. That's
Yeah.
kind of it's not even really like the same style as most of the stuff I do. Um, because I
Yeah,
would
when I first found out who you were and started digging through your music and listening to your music, I'm a big John Mayer fan. I always have been. Most of my life I've been a John
nice.
Mayer fan, and I saw that you remixed. I was like, oh, that's interesting from a house music producer, and I was like, oh, this is
Yeah,
so
yeah.
much different than like the other stuff that you make, but it's still super good. Great job on the song.
Thank you, dude. Thank you.
Yeah.
Like honestly, like his session was awesome, and he programmed a bunch of the drums and stuff,
Hmm.
and they were like very. Sometimes it's hard to make like electronic drums sound like almost live,
Right.
and it was like he's definitely a very good drum programmer also. But going through all the raw guitar stuff, like that's why I made the main part of the drop, like
Yep.
the guitar. It was sort of like a background guitar part, but I was like, this should be front and center.
Yeah.
For sure.
Early on too, you had, and I kind of want to dive into this because you just released a new collab with them. You had a ton of support, and I didn't realize how far back your guys' history went with the bingo players. Um,
Dude, he really put me on. I mean,
yeah.
he's the first person to sign one of my tracks. Like I had done just a self-released like SoundCloud record called Guns, and I played. I got booked sort of randomly for some festival, Life in Color in Miami,
Oh yeah.
and I played it, and we got like a really awesome clip. Like the crowd was just crazy, and we got this clip of me playing the song at the crowd with the giant crowd. And my now manager, who manages bingo players, also
Okay.
hit up my old manager and was just like, "Dude, you should have sent us this record. Like Martin loves it. We would have put it out." And then we were like, "All right, well, what if we do like an edit, and then you guys release that?" So I think he like played. He was like, "All right, cool. Like Martin's gonna play it at his show tonight, and then depending on how that goes." And I remember just being home. I was like, "I hope it goes well." I hope it goes
Yeah.
well. But yeah, and then yeah, we just became like they put me on tour with him for like a few weeks after that, and we just became homies.
And then you did a mix for them as well on Sirius XM like way back when, right?
Yeah, I did some mix for him. He had me remix his song "Out of My Mind,"
Hmm.
and yeah, we've done a ton together. But we're
That's
both like
awesome.
nerd, like we both like love classic rock and
Yeah,
like
yeah.
all sorts of like 80s and 90s like nostalgia stuff.
So you guys have
So
a lot in common then too.
yeah,
Yeah, that
we have
helps.
a really fun time like doing shows together.
That's cool.
Yeah, it's like always a really good hang.
So tell me a little bit about Bathroom Line, which is your new collab with them. It's actually it's to be completely honest with you, I'm not just saying this because you're on the show, but like honestly, it's one of my favorite house songs right now. So,
Thank you, bro. Thank
what
you.
kind
That's
of went
awesome.
into writing that song, and like how did that kind of work itself out?
Yeah, so basically, um, it was like my manager who manages bingos also showed me like a really rough demo that Martin
Hmm.
had put together with it, and I was like, I need to be on this song. Like the vocal, I was just like, this vocal's so much fun. Like I have to. So Martin sent me the parts, and I did one demo of it that I like loved, loved, and he liked it, but he was like, it's just a little too. I don't know even know what the word. It was like very, very tech house.
Okay.
And I was so bummed. Like I was like, "Fuck, this is the best thing I've ever made." Like, and then like a couple weeks later, I took another crack at it, and then that's sort of like the direction that you hear now.
But yeah.
Um, and then yeah, we just kind of went back and forth on it a bit. He did like he produced like all of the vocal, like all the. I don't know if you could really hear, but like if you hear the vocal completely on its own, like there's a
Hmm.
lot of really awesome, intricate, just nerdy production on it that he absolutely killed, like playing with the formant
I'll
and
go back and I
all.
mean I'll listen to it again. So next time
Yeah, yeah,
next time I
yeah.
listen, I'll pay attention to that.
And then he did like he had just really cool stuff in there that I loved. Like there are these like big sort of blown out like synth toms,
Hmm.
and then the whole sort of chaotic like second break.
Yep.
Uh, with like the sort of speeding up LFO stuff. Like that's all him. And yeah, and we got to like play it out a couple times before it came out. And
What was this your first collab with him?
no, we did one song during the lockdown that was
Okay.
more of like a throwback sort of almost blog housey kind of sounding
Oh,
thing.
nice.
Yeah, it was really fun for us to do,
Yeah,
but
yeah.
it was not so much something that we'd like play at our shows.
Why do you think that it took, because you've known him so long, you've built such a good relationship over the years, and because he took you on tour and all that, why do you think it took so long to actually do a song together?
Dude, I think because I never ask anybody. I never think
Ah,
anybody like wants to do collabs with me.
okay.
So like I'm like I never want to ask unless I
Yeah,
have like a specific thing where I'm like, yo, you're amazing at this thing. Like, can you help me with this or something? But I'm getting better at it. But like, yeah, I'm always just like, I'll
more
just
on you.
finish it myself.
That's funny.
Yeah.
Um, Previously, when you first started the Zookeeper project, and obviously times were a lot different. People like different musics, and times have definitely progressed since then. But so have you as an artist. You went from making a lot of big room, which was hot back in 2015, 2016, to more of a tech house, which is hot now. What has that progression kind of been like for you, and why did you decide to kind of change your sound over time?
Yeah, I mean, it hasn't really been a conscious like decision. I sort of just
Okay.
make whatever I'm like feeling. Um, Even sort of like getting back to like what we were talking about, like sort of like my social media. It's like I just it's just like isn't something. It's not that I don't take music seriously, but I don't. I really don't treat this like a business.
Mm.
Maybe I probably should more, but like it's just sort of like the stuff that I've been releasing recently is mostly the result of like the first like handful of shows that I did back after COVID, like after like the lockdown kind of stuff
Hmm.
ended. I realized that like the like my sets, like most of the stuff I made the year like in like the year and a half of like lockdown didn't really work that well like in my
Right.
sets. I didn't
Yeah.
even really want to play them. Like and I love some of those songs, but it's like the stuff that I want to hear when I'm sitting like at a desk is just so different than what I want to like hear if I'm like out. So starting with the big room stuff, like yeah, that was really fun, but I feel like I didn't really have I was still like learning about production so much and I didn't really have a grasp on especially cuz I hadn't like DJ'd that much at that point.
Right.
I feel like I had a grasp like sonically on it, but I didn't really understand like really the way to arrange these songs properly.
Uh,
It's actually one of the great things about learning sort of like deeper house music production is that you realize that it plays into even like the biggest big room records like sort of adhere to the same sort of principles and
yeah.
that's like why some of these records work or why most of those records work. Um, so yeah, so and then I had like a period where I sort of got into like this sort of poppy piano house stuff.
That's one of my favorite styles of houses. I love piano house.
Me too. I
Big
love it. I
fan.
love it.
Love, yeah, absolutely love it.
But
I
the only
love what
problem is like sometimes I play these shows and I'm like I just want to go hard. It's weird that like a lot of the music that I've released like wouldn't really work in like the sets that I'm playing
right.
these days. Um, but yeah, it was really just like that's sort of like my thing this year is like I just everything I do I'm like I want to be able to like play this at my show.
Right. And I guess that kind of leads me into the next question is do you think your project became more marketable once you kind of went that tech house direction
I actually
because of
have no
today's
idea. I have
landscape?
no
No
idea.
idea.
You know what? Like if you're talking about just like going for Spotify streams, it's way better to go with like these poppy sort of
Yeah.
records. But I also don't know like I don't know how active those listeners are. Like there are a lot of acts. Some of like the people who like headline festivals don't have a ton of like monthly listeners on Spotify, but I feel like
Yeah.
the people who listen are like real fans, and that's more important I think than having a bunch of people who like passively listen on like a workout playlist or something. But at least like for where I was like I don't know.
You want to grow a true like I listen to your music and I search out your music because I like you as an artist rather than just like, oh, it's like in the EDM playlist type of thing.
Right, right,
Yeah.
yeah. But also, I mean, even that though, I feel like it's like giving me too much credit for thinking too much. Like I really just like my whole thing is like I feel like if I make something, I'm like if I kind of like this, then chances are like there'll be a few more people at least who do, and I just want to play those records at my shows.
That makes sense. Yeah. You said something before the interview is nobody really knows what they're doing. So just You kind of just be creative and see whatever sticks. I feel like that's very much the attitude that you have with your music, which is awesome. Um, Other than trying to adapt, like adapt your sound potentially to like what would be hot or whatever with tech house. Um, what do you think like causes your overthinking of making music?
I don't really know. I actually think like DJing helps because
Okay.
sometimes like you'll make like a quick, dirty sort of mix down of like a
Mm-hmm.
record you're working on, and then it'll go off when you play it, and that kind of thing makes me go like, oh yeah, like this, like I'm overthinking it,
Yeah.
like if it works out, it's pretty like you're pretty close, you know. But I think a lot of times, like the more time you spend like in the studio, not out at the shows, I worry more about like how people are going to critically listen to this when like they're home. I also thought like for a while, I mean, I still like feel like this, but like when you're like learning how to make like a genre of music that you don't have experience in, like I always think that I'm missing part of it. I'm like,
Uh,
oh, I must be missing one of the key ingredients, and I don't even realize like what I'm missing here. And I mean, honestly, that might even be true, but it just doesn't matter. It's not
right.
really worth thinking about.
Yep. Yeah, because
Um,
at the end of the day, if you are missing a key ingredient or what you think about it that way, like it could be just like that's what could potentially set you apart and make your music different and unique to you too.
right. Yeah. Yeah. Exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly. Like I love watching like chef stuff, like Chef's Table and all that kind of
Oh
stuff.
yeah. Yep.
And I feel like with chefs, it's always like I went to Paris, I learned how to make like proper like French cuisine, and then I left and did my own thing. And I think somewhere in my head, I'm always like, oh yeah, you got to do that. Like you have to go learn how to do everything about the craft first, and then do your own thing. But the older I get, I'm like,
Why?
nah.
Yeah.
Like, I mean, that can be helpful,
Right.
and I do still try to do that. I don't know. I just if I went back, I would just anytime anybody asks me for like advice, like someone who's like a new producer,
Hmm.
I'm like, just learn how to finish your demos really quickly.
That's super important. Like
Yeah,
even if they're not perfect, like just finish. Like
yeah,
I feel like people get caught up. Like even like shout out to my roommate. He's also a music producer, also the editor of this podcast. But I feel like he does that because he's earlier on in his career and uh, he gets caught up on like not fully finishing songs. Like he has ideas, but then it's just like, maybe not. And it's like he has like so many open project files that like, and I know this isn't just him. I'm just using him an example, but so many open project files that producers sometimes have, and it's like just learn how to like fully complete. Because the more that you fully complete, even if they're not good and you don't put them out, at least you're in the practice of like, okay, this is how you wrap something up. This is how this
right.
is the full
Which
process.
is it is the
Yeah,
hardest thing.
yeah, yep. Why do you think people should let like their creativity flow and not get caught up in being quote unquote perfect?
One of the benefits of like doing that when you're making music on a computer is you end up like stumbling across like these happy accidents,
Uh,
and that alone is like a good enough reason to just kind of wing it. Sometimes like something quantizes wrong, and it's like so much better than what you played. So, um, yeah, I don't know.
I feel like
That's
I feel like some people like believe that they have to be perfect to be successful, and I feel like that couldn't be further from the truth.
yeah. I don't think that's I relate to maybe like having that thought, but really when it comes down to it, it's like that's probably just sort of an excuse for not doing stuff.
Yeah,
Not exactly an excuse, but it's like when people talk about like being a perfection. Oh, I'm just such a perfectionist. I'm like, you're not.
you're not.
You know, it doesn't really exist, so you're not. But
I
even
think.
like you listen to what was that record I was listening to yesterday? That record 400 by Chris Lake.
Oh yeah, yep.
So sick. It's like one of the things I love about him is that you could hear this like confidence in his
Hmm.
production, where he's like, "Oh, I could take something that almost sounds wrong and I make it work."
Yeah,
Uh,
Chris Lake's amazing.
he's unreal. He's unreal.
Yeah,
He's so good, and that record is like a really good example of that, where it's like there are probably people who would hear parts of those parts of like that elements of that record and be like, "Oh, this is like wrong,"
right.
but it's like, yeah, but it like
It still works
bangs.
though. Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah.
Um, so that's like the level like I like striving for, you know?
That makes sense. Yeah. You said another thing that you do like you get caught in like a constant like loop of overthinking. How do you manage to get yourself out of that loop?
I don't know, dude. It's honestly the
Just do it.
biggest problem my whole life. I really have no idea. Um, Unfortunately, like I feel like I end up just having to abandon projects every once in a while
Yeah.
because of it. Sometimes you just can't get it to work. But I don't know. I mean, in terms of my own stuff, it's like there are ways I feel like I end up painting myself into a corner production
Mm,
wise sometimes. And it's always anytime that happens, I can go back and be like, oh, I violated like one of my sort of guidelines for
right.
making music. Like it's always because of that, and it's almost always because the initial like 8 or 16 bar loop, I didn't get it right, and I started arranging the song before I got it right. And not meaning it's perfect, but it's just like that, especially when it comes to like more sort of club oriented stuff. It's really hard to fix that if you didn't get that
Right. What do you think your
right.
percentages of like finishing songs like because I know you've said you've worked on this a lot, but like now, what do you think your percentage of like actual finished songs that you actually complete versus like that you have to throw away?
Uh it's actually like kind of high. Like it's probably higher than it sounds like it would be by the way I'm
Yeah.
talking about it.
Yeah, yeah.
But when I was doing like more melodic stuff, I finished almost everything.
Okay.
Uh, with the club records, it's just sort of like I don't know. Maybe it's like 50-50. If they don't work, they don't work. You know.
Mhm.
I mean, the toughest thing, the sort of weird thing that I've been encountering recently is like every once in a while there'll be like a record that plays out really well in my sets, but it just isn't quite hitting right in terms of like something you would actually just like listen to at home.
I've always wondered why people like certain artists play stuff in their sets that like people really like in their sets, but then they never actually end up releasing it. Like Zed's Dead has done that a bunch.
I guess a lot of people do that. I used to wonder the same thing. Like,
Yeah.
well, it would drive me nuts sometimes when there'd be like artists who'd be like, "Yeah, I'm never releasing that." And you're like,
Why?
but I don't know. I mean, I think that kind of goes for anybody though. Like, if I went through your folder of like,
Yeah.
you know, works in progress, I'd
Yeah.
probably find a bunch of stuff that you think sucks, and I'm like, dude, this is like really good.
Yeah.
I don't know. For whatever reason, sometimes we're just not. That's like actually, I feel like a tip that I have for myself. I need to constantly remind myself of, but it's like, we have no idea like what is really that good of our
That's
own
what I'm
stuff.
saying. What is perfect? Yeah.
Yeah. And
Yeah.
sometimes like you have this idea when you start the demo of like what you want it to be like. And if it's not achieving that, it can be really frustrating, but sometimes you like achieved something else. But that's sort of something that like probably stops people from releasing stuff all the time.
That's true. Yeah. I had a question about because you said your percentage of completion for melodic songs, you'd almost complete all of them.
Hmm.
Why is that? Versus like the other stuff?
I think with those, it's because I was like really combing through acapellas
Hmm.
that my managers or whoever publishing people would like send to me. And I'm really, really, really picky when it comes to the melodic stuff.
Okay.
So it's a little bit easier to like rely on the melody. Like I feel like sometimes with those songs, it's not that they're easy to produce, but sometimes like you have to just not screw them up.
Yeah.
And you could really lean heavily on the melody. You know, like some of the greatest sort of like classic dance records, sonically like maybe the mix isn't that good or the kick isn't that great, but it doesn't really matter. So I think with those, yeah, it's like once you have it sort of working, it's you're like
Just
90%
yeah,
there.
just adding tiny little touches to it to finish it.
Whereas like there was a demo that I finished yesterday that like I was stuck on. It's like this club record, stuck on it, and then I just realized I was like, oh, I just didn't make the drums good enough, and I went back redid the drums, and then like now I'm like very stoked on it,
Sweet.
and it's just so weird because usually if it's a melodic record, I'd be like, oh, if this isn't working, it's because the melody or the chords or something like that aren't right. And yeah, I just feel like with club records, like kind of the
It's a little
opposite.
different, yeah. With your approach of like having more of like a carefree, just let your creativity flow, do you think it takes less or more time for something like to actually figure out like what is good enough to release? Like,
Yeah, I don't know. I mean,
because I feel like with that approach, like it could lead someone into like I'm just gonna complete stuff, but like how do you decipher between like okay, this is something that I just like needed to complete so that I could get this out or whatever. But this, and then something else would be like, oh, this is really good. Let's release this. Like, how do you make that decision in your own head?
Well, I take like days. Like if I finish a demo, I like
Hmm.
won't listen to it for a few days.
Okay.
That's at least, because like it's I feel like half the battle sometimes is trying to maintain your objectivity
Hmm.
to your own stuff. Even I'm still guilty of like listening to the stuff way too much, but that helps a bit. Obviously, like when it does well live, it really helps.
Right.
But
Yeah, the crowd
for
testing
the most
thing.
part, though, if I'm finishing something, I'm trying to release it.
Yeah. Yeah. That's awesome. Well, is there any before we wrap up? Is there anything that you think that is important for new producers or up and coming producers to know about like your kind of approach for writing or overthinking things? Do you have any tips for them?
Um, I mean, again, it's another thing I just tell myself all the time. But you just have to internalize, like, I make whatever I make. If I'm trying to make a record in so and so style, even if you achieve that, it's not necessarily good. You're better off like trying to do that a little bit, but
Yeah.
really just like letting your own thing happen. Um, I guess that would be it. Yeah,
Maybe,
you
yeah.
make what you make, dude.
Make me,
You
yeah.
know?
Be confident in yourself enough to just say fuck it and
Yeah.
roll with it. Yeah.
But also let people trash you and like,
Yeah.
if your stuff sucks, like and you need people who are like good enough to be like, dude, this is not it.
Going back to the Instagram thing, I feel like you kind of jokingly do that too a lot. Like you're like
About
someone,
myself.
yeah, someone bashed me in the head.
Yeah. Sometimes you need it, you know what I'm saying?
Yeah, yeah. Awesome, man. So as we wrap up, first of all, thank you so much for being on the pod.
Yeah, thank you for having me, dude. It was fun.
Yeah. Couple of last closing things. What are you most excited for coming up this year? What do you got? I know you got Lollapalooza coming up. That's one
Yeah,
of the things.
Lollapalooza is
Yeah,
gonna be crazy. That
that's a
is definitely
huge
the thing I'm
festival.
most excited for coming up. About like a month, maybe like 2 months away.
Awesome.
So yeah, and then yeah,
Anything
just a bunch of shows. Got a few more festivals and
sweet.
a lot of new music coming out. So
Awesome. Where can the listeners get in touch with you?
probably my Instagram. I think I'm the most active on there.
Same. Instagram's my favorite platform. I'll link that in the
Yeah.
description for you. And then one last final question I ask at the end of every interview. If there's one piece of advice you could tell yourself when you first started your Zookeeper project, what would it be?
Finish all your demos.
Awesome, man. Well, thank you so much again, and I'll hopefully talk to you soon.
Awesome. Thank you, Justin. I appreciate it, man.